Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts About the 40K Universe. I am your host, Gershwin, and you are watching One Mind Syndicate. Today we continue talking about the Salamander's Legion, or the Salamander's Chapter, as we get into the Promethean Cult. We're also going to be talking about an alternative reality. If the Imperium would have never adopted the Imperial Cult and rather adopted the Promethean Cult, what would 40K look like? So make sure to stay to the end of the video for that. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. We post Warhammer 40K content every single day. And of course, if you have any suggestions or if you have questions, comment down below. But with that said, let's get into 40 facts on the Promethean Cult. The Promethean Cult is a variation of the faith of the standard Imperial Cult that has been officially recognized by the Ecclesiarchy as a non-heretical faith that has deeply influenced the Salamander's Chapter of Space Marines and the people of their volcanic homeworld of Nocturne. Set down first during the time of the Great Crusade as the teachings of the Primarch Vulcan in writing form and as ritual practice, the Promethean Cult formed a body of doctrines and promoted the spirit and culture the Primarch desired for his 18th Legion. A work of both clear vision and deep allegory, it drew both upon ancient Terran philosophical and martial thoughts, and the rich culture and mythic history of Nocturne on which Vulcan had been raised. Core to its tenets was the conviction that the Legiones Astartes had been created to fulfill a single purpose, the protection and liberation of all humanity, and that they were each and every one a savage weapon given physical and spiritual form to this end. As living weapons, they were shaped and honed on the anvils of destruction and by the hammer of war, just as the blade is shaped in the fires of the forges to its perfect edge. The teachings of the cult emphasized self-reliance, loyalty, duty, patience, awareness, self-sacrifice, and above all, self-discipline and endurance. Drawing from Nocturne's culture of craft and trial, fire served as dual symbol of creation and destruction, and was taken as the cult's symbol and sign, as were the emblems of the anvil and the hammer. Implacable determination and the ability to endure any hardship is of equal importance within the teachings of the Promethean Cult. The trials of endurance and strength, often marked by ritual scarring or branding, became commonplace in their training and ongoing spiritual disciplines. These practices, alongside overtly mystical elements of the Salamander's belief system, became commented on as barbaric by their fellow detractors, some of whom saw the growing strength of the Promethean Cult within the Legion as superstition and falsehood, contrary to the imperial truth. The cult promoted the worship of no gods and set as its fundamental tenet the primacy of humanity in the cosmos. This was not enough to deflect such criticisms in most cases, however, and it is worthy of note that some have since theorized that the strength of this mythos within the 18th Legion served in part to oculate it. Their emissaries never received more than a polite indifference in their reception by the Legion or its masters, and no warrior lodge to spread the War Master Horus's poison was found in its ranks, nor would such a thing likely ever be possible. In the present era, the Promethean Cult calls on its followers to emulate the deeds and be true to the teachings of the Nocturnian Primarch, Vulcan, as well as providing service to and worship of their divine father, the Emperor of mankind. Prometheans believed deeply in the virtues of self-reliance and self-sacrifice for others, long defining cultural values of the Nocturnian people, who have struggled to survive the harsh environments of their volcanic and earthquake-racked homeworld. They hold a firm belief in isolationism. This is the tenet of their faith, that only through spiritual meditation and exploration performed in isolation from others can a person gain true understandings of both themselves and how they can best honor the legacy of Vulcan and serve the will of the Emperor. Prometheans make use of fire in many of their rituals and ceremonies, and believe that they must be cleansed by the pain of fire before every major undertaking or initiative. The hammer, sometimes called Vulcan's sigil, the forge, and the anvil are also important symbols of Prometheans due to the importance of the art of smithing in Nocturnian culture. Promethean believers also hold sacred the words of the ancient ritual book known as the Canticle of Immolation, which is often read by the Eniacs. the name given to the Salamander's chaplain during the chapter's various ceremonies. For the Salamander Astartes, Promethean beliefs manifest themselves most readily in the form of honor scarring. Before and after every battle they engage in, a Salamander Astarte will have a symbolic scar burned into his body, and another after the completion of combat, if he survives. Veteran Salamanders who have served the chapter for hundreds of standard years and thousands of battles will have their entire bodies covered in honor scars, including their ebon-skinned face, which only receives the honor scar after all other skin on their body has already been so marked. As the Promethean Cult openly calls on its adherents to venerate the Primarch and follow the Emperor loyally, it is not considered heretical by the ecclesiarchy, and instead has received official sanctions as one of the accepted variations of the Imperium state religion. There were a variety of reasons why the Promethean Cult never caught on amongst other Space Marine chapters, like the teachings of Guilliman or Rogaldorn. The major reason was that only the Salamanders were raised with a selfless ideology toward humanity. All other legions held more respect for their own kind than humanity. Space Marines drew power from the courageousness displayed by their captains and Primarch. The heroic actions of their battle brothers inspired them to enact incredible feats of actions themselves. The Salamanders, on the other hand, drew inspiration from the selfless sacrifice for the defenseless humans. To them, dying for humanity was fulfilling the request of the God Emperor and honoring the teachings of their Primarch, something that other legions were never raised to believe. Because of their disregard for their own life, the Salamander Legion never reached the size of a legion like the Ultramarines or the Imperial Fists. This was another factor why the Promethean Cult was never spread past the Salamander Legion and the few planets they protected. And finally, while the Promethean Cult never worshipped the God Emperor, their rituals and superstitious beliefs were never a draw to other legions whom held the Imperial truth as the only belief doctrine they needed. Nevertheless, it is still interesting to think of how different the Imperium of Man would have been if it was the Primarch Vulcan and not Lorgar who had spread his belief to humanity. What if the Imperial Cult was never inducted as the primary religion of the Imperium, but rather the Promethean Cult? While the Promethean Cult holds a core ideology of self-reliance and self-sacrifice for others, this wouldn't make it invulnerable to the touch of chaos. The fire rituals, scarification, and battle ceremonies calls to chaos, and as the cult spread, the risk of corruption would increase. The major difference is that at its core, the Promethean Cult would remain pure, because unlike the Imperial Cult, the leaders of the cult would be the Adeptus Astartes. Space Marines and humans would have a stronger relationship under the Promethean Cult. While in the current millennium, Space Marines are seen as myth and legend, the Promethean Cult would build a world where collaboration between the two imperial organizations would be a necessity. Each army would remain separate due to the fear created during the Horus Heresy, of entire Imperial Guard regiments being coerced by their Space Marine overlords to turn against the Imperium. But the two organizations would see themselves as equals. Space Marines would not look down upon Imperial Guardsmen. Imperial Guardsmen would look to Space Marines for inspiration, rather than looking at them in amazement. Exterminatus would be a last resort, as each Imperial planet and the people on them would be seen as worthy of life. The Promethean Cult would breed an Imperium that values self-reliance more importantly than paying tithes. Planets would willingly send their sons and daughters to fight for the Imperium, rather than being forced to do so by the ecclesiarchy. Technology would not change much because the Adeptus Mechanicus would still believe in the Cult Mechanicus. Study into anything forbidden in the current millennium would still remain forbidden in this alternative reality. But of course the biggest change would be the worship of the God Emperor. In the Promethean Cult today, the Emperor is venerated as a god, but that is because of the influence of the Imperial Cult. Without the Imperial Cult, the Emperor would be seen as a great human, the greatest human that ever walked the earth, but he would be seen as mortal. If this would affect the ability of the Emperor to hold shut the warp gate on Terra, that we could not know for certain. Many believe that it is the trillions of humans that worship the God Emperor that fuels his existence on the Golden Throne and stops him from dying. but these are all speculations. What we can say for certain is that Imperial worlds would be much more independent than now, and if the Age of Strife taught humanity anything, it is that dependence on other worlds could prove fatal should a warp storm appear. Ultimately, the Promethean Cult would build better cooperation within the Imperium, specifically between Space Marines and Imperial Guardsmen, and reduce the reliance on the God Emperor and the Ecclesiarchy. But the self-sacrificing ideals might lead the Imperium to take heavy losses in the name of success and the Promethean Cult. And those were 40 facts on the Promethean Cult. If you're a Salamanders player, share this with your friends on Facebook, Twitter, or whatever social media you guys use to show them that not only is your Primarch Vulcan the strongest and one of the better Primarchs of the 20 Primarchs, but his teachings are also better and would have made the Imperium a whole lot better place for humanity if he would have had his way. What do you guys think? The Promethean Cult seems like a very positive, I guess, doctrine of beliefs than the Imperial Cult, but at the same time it was created by someone that was not corrupted by chaos, and at some point I'm pretty sure they would have gone into conflict with the Imperial Cult, but because I don't really think that Lorgar would have just been like, oh okay, the Promethean Cult is here, I guess my Lectitio Divinatus and all that other stuff can just be thrown away. No, the Chaos would have still tried to have both of them fight it out, and what would have probably ended up happening is a fusion between the Imperial Cult and the Promethean Cult, so it probably wouldn't be that much different than we have today. The big, huge difference would be the whole concept of cooperation between the between the Imperial Guard and the Space Marines. Basically, Space Marines wouldn't be assholes to humanity, like most of them are today, which is a huge positive. Whether that would be positive for the Imperium, I'm not too sure, because you also have to keep in mind that the Salamanders adopt this way of thinking, or this is their way of thinking, and the Salamanders Legion or the Salamanders Chapter is not doing so hot. It's notorious for almost always being destroyed to the very last man. Like, they're always trying to bounce back from something. Would that happen to the Imperium if the Imperium adopted this ideology of protecting each other and I guess being nicer to humanity? Would that hurt the Imperium? Because if there's less exterminatus, yeah, that's good for humanity, but if there's less exterminatus, then there's more of a chance of whatever you're trying to kill to, fight back and keep going. So what do you guys think? Comment down below. Again, if you have any suggestions of other topics, please comment down below, let us know. We read the comments every single day. And if you like our videos and you want to support us on Patreon, please do so. It's a simple $1 a month, and it helps us create more videos. If you can't, we understand. Simply by liking, commenting, and sharing, it really helps out the channel. But with that said, I'll see you guys tomorrow. This was Gershwin with One Mind Syndicate, signing out.